All right, thank you everyone and welcome to the webinar. My name is Lindsay Hampson. I'm from eBridge Connections. We're a Canadian company and we care about integration and obviously Magento. We're working today with a great partner, One-to-One e-commerce. They're out of Cleveland, Ohio. So it's going to be about 20 minutes of content and there's a live chat. Feel free to type in your questions. You're going to hear from Ben, who's the CEO of One-to-One e-commerce out of Cleveland. So far, working with Ben, he's been really diligent and hardworking, and his team is fantastic. And Dave, who's our sales manager at eBridge Connections, who's very, very positive, and he's always putting customers first. You'll hear from Dave talking about some integration with Magento. All right, so let's kick off. I'm going to introduce Ben from One-to-One e-commerce. Ben, over to you.
Hey everybody, this is Ben from One-to-One e-commerce, as I was said several times earlier. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Lindsay, if you don't mind, by the way, going to the next slide, that'd be great. So One-to-One e-commerce is a Magento professional solutions partner. We have all of our team is Magento 2 trained solution developers, and we work primarily with B2B and B2C companies, and in developing and optimizing their e-commerce infrastructure and making sure that they can take full advantage of any e-commerce initiatives to achieve their business objectives, as well as aligning with other goals internally. So moving on into today's topic, we're really talking about what's going on with Magento 1 and Magento 2. So if you go to the next slide for me, Lindsay, that'd be great. And maybe I'll just do like a little bing for you. Bing. Anyway, so with Magento 1, there's been a lot of confusion regarding Magento 1 and a lot of terms being thrown around: end of life, sunsetting, losing support. Then on the other side, Magento has put out, posting that they're supporting Magento customers through 2020. So I'm going to try to clarify some of the, some of the points around that. So moving on to the next slide, the understanding of what end of life means, or what the impact is on Magento 1, really comes down to the difference between the two versions of Magento. So, Magento 1, the two versions were called Magento Community and Magento Enterprise, and the nomenclature has changed. Now it's called Magento Open Source and Magento Commerce, and you may see abbreviations like Magento OS. The first time I saw that, it threw me for a loop. I'm like, Magento's not an operating system like Windows or Mac, and then I was like, oh yeah, they changed the name to Open Source. But now I'm already used to it. So anyway, with the Community Edition, if you move on to the next slide, the only official release from Magento, that's the previous one. The only official release from Magento is that when they launched Magento 2 back, I think it was in October of 2016, they said that they would retire Magento Community version 1 2 years after launch, which would be around obviously October 2018, and they stopped releasing new features almost immediately after the release of Magento 2, but they were still releasing security patches for the community or open source edition of Magento 1. They've put out other subsequent posts or announcements, or in the terms and conditions, you'll see that they've offered support through 2020 for Magento customers. Now, it's important to note that what Magento considers a customer is anyone who's using the Commerce Edition or the Enterprise Edition. Someone who's actually paying Magento a license fee is what they consider a customer. Someone who's using the Magento free version, open source, version, is not necessarily considered a Magento customer by Magento, but more by the agency, whoever developed their site and is managing or maintaining their sites. Since only recently Magento has put out some more verbal communication, nothing really written, that they're probably not going to stop security patches in November of 2018 that they'll continue to support it and make sure that they give a more definitive announcement when they will stop security patches. But they haven't given any timeline, and they haven't been very clear as to what that support is. So by best bets, I would probably say you maybe have a 6-month window around that period. It could be longer, could be shorter. The question is, what are the reasons to move and what are the reasons to stay are really the evaluations that you want to make. So moving into the next step, let's talk about staying on Magento 1. What happens as we move further away from Magento 1's date that they stopped releasing new products, and that more and more companies are moving to Magento 2. So the answer is that as we move forward, the biggest issue, and we're not going to talk about yet losing security patches, but the biggest issues that really most reputable established development agencies are focusing primarily on Magento 2 projects. And companies, we're not at this point, like for example, our agency, we're not training any people in Magento 1 anymore. We don't take existing Magento 1 clients on to build a new Magento 1 site. We'll take clients on to maintain their Magento 1 site if they're looking to move to Magento 2. But as we continue to move away, most Magento 1 developers are already working on Magento 2, and that's where, unless you're looking at, independent freelancers, but even then, they're already moving to Magento 2, and the further we move away, the less Magento 1 work we're going to be. Less Magento 1 work there's going to be. Additionally, also with the extension market, the established extension providers, IWD, Amnesty, Headworks, are no longer releasing Magento 1 extensions. They're really not supporting Magento 1 extensions as much anymore, and they're looking to really close out that market. I regularly get emails from, we're partners with all of them. I regularly get offers from all of them. Hey, one-to-one e-commerce, for $200, we'll let you use every single Magento 1 extension we've ever created, and any number of times. I mean, they're just looking to cash out on whatever's left because they're not making any money off of them anymore because people aren't buying them. So as we move forward away, the resource of the quality pool around Magento 1 developments is going to be harder to tap into and find. Now, with regards to the security patches, so once Magento does stop making security patches, there definitely is some risk from an operational standpoint. So it's important to keep in mind that Magento is its own framework, and it's a framework built on the Xen framework, on PHP, and multiple other components. And so the way the security patches are generally released on Magento is that they'll monitor other, these other resources, and when an exploit's found, let's say for example there's an exploit found in Xen framework and a patch is released, Magento will rewrite that patch to work on Magento, because you can't just take that patch and put it on. It has to be modified for Magento. So they're doing that, and they're maintaining that and looking and doing that now currently at no cost. And that's obviously not a sustainable model for them to continue to do that indefinitely. Another aspect of security is really through the extensions. On the Magento 1 market, there was no vetting of extensions. Anyone can make an extension, post it, sell it. Many of the extension providers are no longer around. People who made Magento extensions, 3, 4, 5 years ago, when Magento 1 sites were, when you probably built your site, aren't around anymore. And that creates, obviously, if we can go to the next slide, it creates real threats around payment processing, because the biggest risk really is around loss of PCI data is probably loss of PCI compliance is probably the biggest risk. But even in the last 5 or 6 months, we've taken over Magento 1 to Magento 2 migrations. We found one company using a common Magento 1 extension for integrating WordPress, and we found that was exploited to place couple of lines of malware code on the checkout page, which was capturing all credit card data for this company for months. And the credit card data was being written to an image, and then the image was being accessed every day and downloaded with the credit card information for months. And in these cases, and we've been involved with these cases as well, where payment processors have identified where these data breaches are coming from and turned off the ability to process credit cards. And it's not a fast answer. It's not like a mea culpa and you're back on the next day. You have to go to, to a QSA, to a qualified security assessor, but, a partner of the PCI Council. And it's usually, a minimum of a three-week process. It can take as long as 2 months and before you get payment processing. And if it's cut off at the processor, at the Visa level or the Amex level, which I've seen happen, you can't even change companies. You're just cut from that payment source. So it is definitely something to take seriously. We've dealt with companies that have seen their Magento sites hacked and held for ransom. And then really the best thing you can do is go to magereport.com, MAGEREPORT.com, enter in your URL. And it will give you a security assessment. It's free, there's no cost, and it'll tell you what patches you're missing. And it's best to follow up. If you have a development partner, speak to them about what's missing, or if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out. But that is the risk of Magento no longer releasing security patches. So let's move on to what are the options off of Magento 1. So the options, before I go right to Magento 2, I'll discuss some of the other options. So we speak to many companies. If you go to the next slide, we speak to many companies in a given month. And we hear companies say, hey, we're comparing, considering going to Magento 2 versus Shopify. And we hear, other companies say we're considering going to Magento 2 versus Demandware, which is now Salesforce Commerce. And to me, it's always amazing that both companies are considering Magento as an option because of extremely different ends of the market. Shopify is an entry-level platform. It does have a solid feature set. But it's not a system that will take you to where that will take you to a IR 500 level by any means. And with regards to Demandware, I mean, development and licensing will easily run $750,000 on moving to Demandware. So it's usually a much bigger job, and Magento easily holds its own against that. Especially with Magento 2, I think it's actually a much more solid platform. So really you need to determine, I guess, how vested you are in your e-commerce initiatives. When looking at it, and what are your feature sets? I mean, there are some solid feature sets on other platforms, and are they enough to meet your needs? But one aspect that you really want to consider, and if you move to the next slide, is that a lot of the work that you put into Magento 1, Magento 1, the connections, the connectors, the learning processes, some of that really can be migrated over to Magento 2. So first, moving over to Magento 2, why is it a better platform than Magento 1? What does it mean that they upgraded? So the first thing is, keep in mind, Magento was originally developed in, I think it was originally released in 2008, and it wasn't until 2010 that they came out with an enterprise version, and it is the most widely used e-commerce platform in the world, both in the community and enterprise edition. And Magento's taken, 8 years, 9 years of feedback, from the customers, and have put it into Magento 2. And it's a very solid platform, not just from a user perspective, but also from an admin perspective, which is a pain point, especially from training. So with Magento 2, it's built on new technologies. It's meant to be not just responsive, but it's really a mobile-first platform. A lot of platforms out there have added responsive features or functionality after the platform has been established. And so typically you're looking at paring down a desktop to a mobile version. Magento 2 is really meant to be mobile first. From a mobile version up to a desktop version, it's extremely responsive on every view, both on the admin and on the front end. There's tremendous SEO capabilities built right in from the control power, from the actual administration portion. So putting in product titles will automatically result in H1 tags and the correct tagging and snippets being laid out through the page. The theming and design is much easier from a development standpoint. The catalog on Magento, the database overall is restructured on Magento 2. It scales a lot more easily, both vertically and horizontally, which means that you can have a lot more records and a lot more traffic at the same time without seeing some of the same strains that you saw around Magento 1. You don't need to throw as it's not as resource intensive as Magento 1, especially because the design is modular. You can decouple aspects of it, to not draw resources that aren't necessary or aren't needed. The checkout process has been totally revamped on Magento 2, using proven industry best practices over the last 4 or 5 years, and then from a merchandising and catalog perspective, Magento 2 does it better, I think, really than almost any other platform out there. It has visual merchandising, very easy to use, and very intelligent cross-sell, upsell, on-site personalization that previously you'd have to engage with third parties to even be able to do that type of personalization. So following certain customer groups and changing that user experience for them as they move through the site. If you move to the next page, Magento put a lot of thought into the admin. I mean, the admin is extremely intuitive to use from the catalog perspective and managing the site settings, administration of it. But more importantly, the ability to create content on the site has really become almost a developer-free process on Magento 2. They've leveraged an enterprise-level CMS into the system called Magento Page Builder, where your catalog team or your marketing team can create, fully functional landing pages with customized banners, sections, visual merchandising rules. You can control and create any content and not just preview it, but actually run it like a layman's staging environment, totally free of any development, any developers. So it really cuts the cords in terms of being able to move ahead with marketing initiatives without having to worry about development costs tied to those types of initiatives. The API is very, very robust. I mean, it's built on a lot of experience on Magento 1. And Magento's also tightened down the processes around the Magento extensions. The marketplace is now a vetted marketplace. Any extensions come in and go through an actual review, not just a technical audit, an automated technical audit, but actual developer audit to make sure that they conform to the best practices and that they don't conflict with other existing extensions. But again, one of the huge aspects of the Magento site is really just I think with Magento 2 is the ability to take full advantage of any kind of marketing initiative that you want to launch without having to rely on developers. I can't tell you how powerful that's been for some of our clients and how that's been leveraged to get the return on investment within as minimum, and sometimes even within 3 to 4 months after launch, they've seen the full cost come back. Another aspect of Magento 2, which makes it very different than Magento 1, was that a lot of sites and a lot of our customers have used Magento 1 to manage their B2B aspects. If you go to the next slide, that'd be great. To their B2B business, and they've done that by utilizing Magento customer groups and other extensions and kind of square peg round holing it. And Magento 2 has a very powerful B2B feature set built in where you can manage negotiated pricing by offering customers segmented catalogs, segmented pricing by specific pricing on tiers. We've had customers come in who have 5 different plans for their 5 different pricing plans for the customers, that each customer would fall into one of those buckets. And we've had customers who have 500 different business, B2B clients, and each one has their own unique pricing, and we accommodate both of those. You have support Magento supports the complex approval processes typically found in a business where you have purchase managers, approval managers, accounting, different types of reports that need to be seen by different people. You can purchase on credit limits and manage purchase on credit terms and manage those credit limits. And then obviously, B2B customers use Magento, use sites very differently than B2C customers. So that's not to say that they're not looking for an easy user interface and an easy, enjoyable experience where they can find the products that they're looking for by searching, by going through layered navigation. But typically on a B2B and a B2B ordering process, you're not looking to go to a catalog page, then go to a product detail page, then back to a catalog page. Most of the time, you're looking to narrow it down and then add many items off from one view. And Magento accommodates those types of views as well. The Magento 2, if you go to the next slide, Magento 2 is constantly releasing updates and coming out with new features every quarter. In fact, yesterday they announced that Amazon Payments is now a core feature, so it no longer requires an integration or an extension. It's now a core feature of Magento. Magento is the platform is up to date on all PCI standards as well as European safety security standards. And really, it's a platform built with the end user in mind. One aspect, if you go to the next slide, one stat that Magento likes to publish all the time is that sites that use Magento grow 2.5 times faster than sites that are using Shopify. And we work with a lot of different companies, and I'll tell you, I'm not sure if that's a stat that is based on the fact that Magento is necessarily a better platform as opposed to the type of people that are attracted to Magento. Cloud-based platforms are typically, SaaS-based platforms are usually, what you see is what you get. You're limited in terms of what the options that they provide to you are, and the companies that are attracted to Magento are the ones that want to differentiate themselves in how they interact with the consumer, how they show their products, how they manage any other back-end processes, and that's where they see additional competitive advantages. And in those cases, Magento provides them the opportunity to do that. And I think that typically, people who are a little bit more less risk averse probably move to Magento and see a good partner in that platform to help them with their growth. In terms of a timeline of moving to Magento, so it's important to think about when is a good time for you to launch and work backwards from that point. So no one wants to launch, during the busy season and take a risk of hurting their rankings, hurting their the functionality that users depend on. So you really want to work backwards about 5 to 6 months before that launch date at a minimum. It takes about a month to put together a proposal, go through all the necessary functions, requirements, and then the typical implementation for us takes about 3 to 4 months before we're ready to launch. And so really, again, 5 to 6 months is before your ideal time to launch is when you want to start speaking to an agency or to a partner like us. Okay, so one of the huge advantages of Magento is that it's excellent. It does an amazing job on e-commerce, and it handles everything that that you'll really ever need to use in terms of driving people through that e-commerce channel or integrating with other types of marketing initiatives. But it is also built to integrate with any existing infrastructures, and that's why we found eBridge has been a great partner. Many times we'll go to a company that has an existing infrastructure for managing the orders, managing the procurement process or the purchasing process or whatever it is, but the e-commerce experience is just not as competitive as it should be or where it needs to be. And so this is where I'll pass off and hand it to David. But before so I'll pass off to David about eBridge and how eBridge provides an amazing opportunity for Magento to leverage a world-class enterprise level e-commerce system with your existing infrastructure.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ben, and thanks everybody for taking the time to listen to our presentation today. We really appreciate it. So, eBridge Connections, who are we? Well, I'll tell you a little bit about ourselves and about myself to begin with. So, my name's Dave Malden. I've been at eBridge for about 9 years, working in primarily the sales and marketing side of things. So, I've been able to watch things like Magento evolve over the years, and also watch our platform evolve over the years. So what I'll do is I'm going to take a couple of minutes, and I'm just going to go through some of the partnerships we have, some of the pre-built connectors that we have, and ideally how eBridge can help interface your Magento, for example, into your accounting package or ERP. Next slide, please. So who is eBridge? Well, essentially, this is eBridge. This is what we do. We've been in business for about 25 years, so we have a long tenure of experience with multiple packages, including Magento. We're currently hosted on the Microsoft Azure network, and we're adding channels every day. So we've got pre-built connectors, which I'll show in a couple of slides, that are being enhanced, augmented, upgraded, and completely new channels that are being added daily. So again, a universal connector is really one of our unique value props where we differentiate ourselves from those players that are in the market. And everything is done here in-house. We've got about 67 people at eBridge, right from support through to development, through to sales and marketing, and then our professional services teams. And we're all in-house here. Next slide, please. So how did we get to where we are? Well, really what we do at eBridge is we've defined and built solid partnerships in our ecosystem. And Ben at One-to-One Commerce and his team are a real key part of that as well. And you can see here we've got a bunch of partnerships where there's certifications, there are certain technical steps that we need to take to make sure that we are compliant with all of the different ERPs, accounting packages, and solutions that are on the market. So for example, with Sage, we're a silver development partner. With Microsoft, we're a gold development partner, and we're built for NetSuite. So those are just some of the examples of the breadth and the depth that we need to build these pre-built connectors and to ensure that what we're releasing to the marketplace is conforming with all of the different solutions that are out there. Next slide, please. So who is our market? Well, really, we have a very wide range. I mean, we have mom and pop sort of shops to startups all the way through to enterprise companies. And you can see a couple of examples here. We've got Everlast, Rad Power Bikes is a new one that came on board. We've got Lush Cosmetics, which is a very, very heavy user of our system. In fact, as we ramp up into the holiday season for Christmas and just into January, the volume that they experience is in the hundreds per hour, the hundreds of orders per hour. So there's a lot of transactions that are moving back and forth, either from Magento or an EDI system. It could be a trading partner. It could be Amazon. All of those are flowing down through our integration platform, down into their accounting package, and then coming back up. So we've got users that are typically running anywhere from maybe 5 to 10 to 20 orders a day up to hundreds per hour. And we're able to scale our solution and throttle it appropriately depending on the client. Next slide, please. So pre-built connectors, well, what does that mean? Well, the reason Ben and his team would come to eBridge is for the fact that having to build out connectors and adapters into their customers' accounting packages or ERPs is a very challenging thing to do. It would be custom work or net new work every single time. What we've done is we've packaged this into a connector that out of the box will get you about 80% of the way to a functioning integration. So standard fields, standard tables, those are all things that we hit. And then the other 20% is often customizations. Maybe there's an add-on that's been, maybe there's a point system or something that's been that's been added to Magento, for example, we may need to add that to our solution. So that's something that we would scope out, we would take a look at, we would obviously want to understand which data moves where does it reside, and then we would, obviously quote that out appropriately. But when we say pre-built connectors, we mean there are tools, there are connectors, there are adapters that we are currently using with these products that you see here that out of the box will get you to move data back and forth. Next slide, please. So this is a 30,000 foot view of eBridge. If you were to step back and take a look at who we are and what we do, you can see in the middle there between all of these systems is eBridge sitting on the Azure cloud, and then on the left we've got all of the different sources that can get plugged into our system. So there is Magento, but we also do, and I'll bring you to the blueprint builder in a moment, but what we do is really anything for e-commerce. It could be Amazon, it could be Magento, it could be EDI. We traditionally started as an EDI company about 25 years ago, so that's one area where we're seeing people that are selling into retail stores. They might be migrating out onto the web, they might be putting up a Magento website, and they're happy to find us so that they can plug into our system and they're able to run everything in one kind of unique spot. They don't have to have multiple providers for multiple things. You can see there's 3PLs, there's shipping software, including ShipStation, and then we also support CRM tools, so Salesforce.com and Microsoft CRM are the popular ones. Next slide, please. And so here I had mentioned previously the blueprint builder, and we'll send this link, this tool, out to you after this webinar ends. But essentially what this tool will allow you to do is to pick the pieces that you have, the systems that you have, and it'll allow you to basically browse the pre-built components that we have. So you can see on the left-hand side, there's an inbound orders piece. Just to the right of that, there's a little eye icon, and if you were to select that, you'd actually be able to drill down to the field level detail. Very cool tool if you're looking to see if eBridge can help out. Very easy to navigate, and we'll share that. Like I said, we'll share that in an email once we follow up on this webinar. Next slide, please. So what does a typical project flow look like? Well, it starts with the blueprint. So ideally, you'd get on a call with one of our representatives, and we'd walk through the systems that you have. What is the accounting package you're running? Which pieces of Magento are you running? Is it Magento 1.9 or 2.0 up? We support all of those. We would select the correct systems, and then we would basically give you a demo that would show an order being processed in Magento down into, for example, NetSuite. After that demo, we're going to put some paperwork together, share that with you, and we would do a kickoff call with a project manager who is basically comprised of a team of 3. And that person is going to be the point person on your project. They're going to be able to communicate things back and forth with you. We're going to have questions on login credentials for both systems. We may have questions on where certain pieces of data go. So those are all things you would work through with your project manager. And then once we get up and live and running, and we get checkboxes beside all of the different workflows, the customer is satisfied, you'll get moved over to our in-house support, and you'll be provided with a dedicated account manager who may help you with any other new connections or changes you may want to make in the future. And then, of course, you can see the last point there. So as you expand out, as you maybe add EDI or add Amazon as a channel, we would be able to plug into those systems as well. Next slide, please. So here's just a few more great testimonials from our customers. We've got a few here. Lifecore Fitness, Char Griller, which is a fantastic company selling barbecue parts. And then we've also got electronics. Next slide, please. So again, if you're looking to get a hold of us, obviously we've got our website. There's some email information here, and we've got a phone number that we'll have an individual or representative here available to take any of your calls. We'll be able to walk through what you're looking to do, understand your needs, and provide a solution if it works for you. So again, the demo, there's a demo button on our website that can always be clicked. You can request a demo. We can show you a quick overview of what we do. And then there's a start planning button, which will drive you to that blueprint builder I was mentioning. So excellent. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time. I know there were a few questions that came in, so maybe I'll, Lindsay, hand it back to you. And is there any questions that we can present at the moment?
Yeah, thanks, Dave, and thanks, Ben. We did, and I'm going to read two of them, just being conscious of time. So I'll just open it up to both of you to answer. The first one is, what are the, I guess as somebody who's on Magento 1 and wanting to move to another platform, you know, what are the two main reasons that they'd want to move to Magento 2? I guess this is really more for you, Ben.
Yeah, great question. So, you know, so just Dave had opened up actually by giving a little bit of his background. I think giving some understanding of my background may give some perspective in my answer. Prior to starting one-to-one e-commerce with my partners, I grew an online company from 2002 to 2013 from about $500,000 in annual sales a year to about $87 million in annual sales a year. And we did both B2B, B2C, had multiple, warehouse locations. And, when you're going from being a $1 million company to an $80 million company on the rise, obviously you migrate platforms and you deal with hiring and expanding workforces. So, typically when I think of benefits of Magento, I usually think of, what are the two, what are the benefits would either fall under making me money or saving me money, right? So I'm going to give the two answers on the benefit around those two centers. So in terms of, I think a huge benefit on the revenue generating side is just Magento's ability to really integrate with any kind of marketing platform. This B2B suite is huge if you're doing B2B. But I think really the number one feature that just blows me away, and I just wish I had it every time I see it. I still wish I had it when I was on the client side. Is its ability to create marketing and content, promotional content, edit the site, and create fantastic looking pages, custom landing pages, without having to use a developer, without having to use a designer. The point-and click functionality is really unparalleled without being able to preview and schedule promotions without having someone to come in and start the sale at 12 a.m. or stop the sale at a certain time. You can schedule all of it in advance, test it out, and it's just fully functional, and it's amazing. And this just helps in so many channels. If you're running paid search, and you can easily create landing pages that are just more highly relevant, your paid search costs are going to go down because your page relevancy is higher. If you're looking to create SEO or create content or do inbound marketing, you can create content around that. So really, that's probably the double-edged sword in your favor. That it generates revenue, by having those capabilities, but it saves a tremendous amount of cost. It saves training costs because it's easy to use. I've seen people build landing pages in 2 to 3 minutes after, probably closer to 8 minutes, without exaggeration, after taking a course and trying it, 2 or 3 times, but generally it's really that simple to use. I did forget to mention Magento Imagine is actually in 2 weeks in Vegas, and it is a wonderful opportunity to really learn about all the benefits and features of Magento 2 and its integration capabilities and just its partner network, and look at the community. If anyone is interested in going to Imagine, I do have discounted passes, significantly discounted passes available, and you can email me, Ben at 121 eCommerce, and I can work on getting you a discounted pass for Imagine. Registration deadline is very, very soon. Again, if you're at all interested in looking at Magento 2, this is probably the best opportunity to learn about it. Sorry for the long-winded answer, everybody.
No, Ben, that was good. That was good. And I know you guys are going to be at Imagine, and we're two of us eBridgers are going to be at Imagine too. So we'd love to meet up with some folks. Just one more question. Again, being conscious of time here. It's actually conveniently a little bit more about integration, and it's the question is, what about customer data and stock updates? Does integration cover this sort of out of the box as well? So Dave, I'll toss this one to you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Lindsay. And that's a great question. So the answer would be yes. And how, so really how we get there is we would work with the merchant to understand what data needs to flow back and forth. And I can say this, that typically these are the 4 workflows or touch points that cover an integration. So one is the order is typically, in this case, coming from Magento Enterprise down into the accounting package, and then something might be sent off to a 3PL or a warehouse so that they can pick, pack, and ship the product. And then when the product gets shipped, eBridge is going to take that shipping information, the tracking number, any other relevant shipping details, and we're going to pass that back up to Magento. So that would be a second common workflow. And then a third common workflow is the stock levels or the inventory quantities are going to be pulled from the ERP and sent back up to Magento. And then the fourth common workflow is the product data workflow. So that is typically something where perhaps you're running a campaign and you've adjusted the pricing, or maybe you've added some new products to your catalog. We would pull that product information and send that back up to Magento. So, and then I should just enhance the order down piece. So when the order comes down, the second thing we can do is we can grab that customer information off of the order, and we can either look up the customer and add the order underneath it, or we can create a new customer record and add the order under that. So bit of a long-winded answer, but those are the 4 common workflows that are part of an integration.
Thanks, Dave. And thanks, Ben, and thanks everyone who's stuck on the line. We appreciate it. We'll be sending out an email tomorrow with a link to watch the recording again, and with just a little bit more information about both of our companies. So I hope you found it useful navigating Magento 1 and 2 webinar with eBridge and one-to-one e-commerce. Thanks everyone again. Have a great afternoon.